you have to dig into something that you're not comfortable with. And creativity quite often, almost always, I think starts there, starts in discomfort.
Welcome to Funeral Potatoes and Wool Mittens, a show for people who embrace the warm and cozy spirit of everyday living in the Midwest. From the blog Random Sweets, I'm your host, Stacey Mergenthal. Living a life of curiosity and creativity means you will at times gracefully let go of things that no longer fuel your passion or serve you positively. This week's podcast guest, Bobbi Lynn Gaukel, and I agree that the earlier in life that you learn this practice, the more open and freer you are to being curious and trying new things. Throughout her life, Bobbi has weaved in creativity and learning, leaving a trail of beauty wherever she goes. In addition to her professional life as a business owner and graphic artist, she gardens, crochets, writes, takes captivating photos, thrifts, repurposes, bakes desserts, crafts, and so much more. Don't you want to meet her already? Her grandma Elizabeth taught her to crochet, all while burning through soap operas together. Bobbi began her graphic design career without a computer, and she once threw away a paint-by-number because for her the whole experience was awful. She's the friend that you give your funeral plants to when they start to die and you feel too guilty to throw them away. Now, the recipes that Bobbi is sharing with you and photos are on my website, randomsweets.com. She has sausage wonton appetizers, crock pot apple butter, and Bobbi's mom's easy carrot cake, which Bobbi says has about an inch of the cream cheese frosting on top. I'm really glad that you're here today. Now, just like Bobbi and I do when we meet for coffee, we visit here for a really long time, so remember that it's okay to pause the episode when you need a break and then resume when you're ready for more. I just hope that after hearing from Bobbi, you'll feel inspired to ask yourself the question, what would happen if... Bobbi, welcome to Funeral Potatoes and Wool Mittens. Thank you for being here with me today.
Hi, Stacy. It's good to be here. I'm excited to chat with you.
I've been so blessed just to get to know you. I think professionally first is kind of how we got together and met, and then we've met in person a few different times, and I consider you a friend now and somebody I pray for, and I just think it's been a great relationship that we've, gotten to know each other the last few years. So you are multi-talented, and to think about doing a podcast. I mean, when you were working on my logos a couple of years ago, I was like, you need to be on the podcast. So it's taken almost 2 years to get you to agree to come. But we talk about how you've crafted a creative life. And I think that you started that when you were very young and didn't even realize it probably. But now as you look back, you can look at things and say, I was doing this before I even knew what being creative was. And now you're in your sixth decade of life and still very curious and creative and getting, past and rid of things that don't serve you well anymore and learning new things that you like. So I'm excited to hear about you today. We'll talk about a lot of different things and it will be fun and inspiring too, I think, for a lot of us. So just tell us about yourself.
My name is Bobbi Lynn Gaukel, and I was, yes, born in the 60s, in the decade of the 60s. So my name comes from Petticoat Junction, which was like, I guess, a TV show then. But yeah, I'm originally from Brookings, South Dakota, but my family actually grew up by Lake Campbell.
Hmm.
So I would say, my early years are really just a rural lifestyle, which a lot of us, from the Midwest have that background. And a lot of time, I think, spent by myself and definitely forming my introvertedness, which to this day is strong, going strong. Yeah, so that's where I was born and raised.
Because you don't have any siblings.
I do have a brother, yeah. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
parents, and I have a brother who's 5 years younger than me. And
Okay.
we lived in a little trailer house. We lived in not a trailer court, but a trailer house. So
Hmm.
pretty modest life. And yeah, by the lake.
Tell me about your pets. I ask because
Oh,
I know the answer.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, we lived in the country basically, and there was like two ways to acquire pets, right? Like they either showed up at your door and you said, "Hi, come live with us." Or you found them in the backyard and you said, "Hey, maybe I can put you in a jar and you can come live with us." So and that happened as well. So yeah, I've loved animals and creatures since I was just can remember. These days it's one cat at a time. But I would love to have like 20. Like there aren't enough cats in the world for me. But I love all pets. So
What do you do for fun? Just fun things that you do.
well, I mean, I am a graphic designer by trade, and I would say that design for me is probably one of the most fun things I do. So
Oh.
you're really lucky in life when the thing that you do to get paid money is also the thing that you find fun. So I'm a designer, I design things, and when I don't have work to design things, I make up work and design things. Um, I'm a gardener, so I
Oh
love
yeah.
being out in the yard. And this time of the year, I am just so ready to be out in the yard and to be working on my garden. I I'm starting seeds from I
Mm.
have a little mini greenhouse set up in my kitchen this year, and so I haven't really gotten into that too much in the past, but I'm getting a jump on gardening because I'm ready for it. I think maybe for fun, I like to, probably my favorite thing is to be with my friends, but I don't like big crowds. I don't necessarily
Mm.
do a lot of parties. I don't go out a lot at night. I just love like small groups, two or three people getting together for coffee, chatting about our lives and what we have going on. That for me is like the ultimate fun thing. And I try to
Sure.
every week, I try to think, well, this week, what am I doing? How am
Mm.
I connecting with someone? And because I live alone, I think that's really important to do. But luckily, I also think it's fun. So,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Have you always been like that? Because you and I were just talking before we started recording about you visiting with a friend and being intentional about that because they don't live in your area. And was thinking when you were saying that about how our parents, my mom and dad had a few friends that would come over, or one married couple was in Sioux Falls, and we would once a month or however often it was, would go and see them and spend a day at their house. And we just don't do that anymore, especially at either each other's homes. We meet for coffee or something like that. But have you always been like, I want to hang out with some friends or go for coffee and head like that?
I don't think so, actually. We did that too, growing up. It was mostly family. We would
Mm.
have a little adventure a day and we would drive you know, wherever
Hmm.
my grandma or my aunts and uncles where they lived and visit for an afternoon,
Sure.
something like that. But a lot of my earlier years, I really do think were spent alone. And that's where I started to cultivate that idea of self-entertaining, or what I'm now calling, I didn't call it creativity at all or think of it as creativity, but I do think it came from my alone time more maybe
Hmm.
than my social time. And probably when I became a young adult is when I started to realize the value of friendship and the value of getting to know people deeply. My first job was at South Dakota State, and it was like instant adulting from kind of a sheltered childhood, and even college years I lived at home. So pretty
Mm.
sheltered, even as a 22-year-old going out in the world in my first job. But I think that job required me to step into relationship with people, and I loved it. That's when I kind
Mm.
of discovered that I'm way more social than I would have thought that I was. And I think that it's just continued to kind of ebb and flow and evolve over the
Mm.
years. that's why I don't really like labeling myself an introvert because I think people are more complex, right, than one word says. And so I'm pretty social, but I also love being alone still.
Hmm. I'm the same way too. I can be at home 5 days by myself if Jason's over the road working,
Yeah.
and it doesn't bother me at all. I wouldn't consider myself an introvert, but yet I would say that I am because I don't like peopling.
Yeah.
So, like you said,
Yeah.
a couple people at a time, but when you get into
Yeah.
the big, large groups, it's like I can
Yeah.
handle that for maybe an hour and then it's too much peopling.
Yeah. I have
Yeah.
a book club that we meet a couple times a month, and I love these people dearly. And it's kind of a bigger group, but usually
Mm,
only maybe 4 or 5 people come at once. So it's that vibe that I love, just the right amount of
sure.
people. We call our group the third hour, and a friend of mine is who coined that phrase, saying that her thought was that generally with people, sometimes it takes that amount of time into a conversation before people tend to get super vulnerable and say what's really going
Mm.
on in their life or in their heart. And so that group is great. And we routinely go to at least to the third hour. And then
Oh,
I'm exhausted. Like I am so tired. It's like I cannot for sometimes for a couple of days. I just need to be by myself
yeah.
because of the depth of conversation.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, I love it, but at the same time, yeah, I need to recharge.
So your creative trajectory has really had a lot of ups and downs. You've had successes, you've had what you might consider failure, but we know they're not really failures. And it's led you to try new things, to experiment. You've learned now as you've gotten older, what we all need to learn at a younger age, I think, is when something no longer fuels your passion or serves you, you feel like you've outgrown it. Just like you start reading a book and you're not into it, you're not obligated to finish that book. You can close it and start something else. And I think a lot of it seems to have driven you to this, what you talk about lately a lot is your curiosity. And as you've been reflecting over these past few years, where has all of this brought you? I want to talk about you started craftiness in the 70s.
That was, it was not a thought in the 70s that no one had the title of being creative. Everybody was making crafts, though. I feel like
Latch
it was
hooking
just
and
my world. But I was thinking about it as I was thinking about talking to you about this. And, really in school, I don't know what it's like as far as art in school now, but a lot of the practices that we did when I was, in grade school were like kind of out of the box. I look back and
mm,
we learned stained glass. We did leather tooling.
oh wow.
There were like things that we were doing macrame plant hangers. Like we were making stuff. Nobody sat
Hmm.
us down with just, and we did have paint and, we did make paintings
Hmm.
or things, more traditional kind of artwork, but it was true. The 70s were just really a time of that being part of the culture, I think. And I'm sure that was my gateway into life,
Gateway.
right? Like it
Hmm.
was, it was.
Yeah.
Um, and so it wasn't anything that I particularly did, but I was surrounded by that. And I found that I really enjoyed those kinds of endeavors. And the 70s were great to grow up if you're going to turn into a designer or a creative person, I think.
I like now that a lot of the things from the 70s are coming back, whether
Yeah,
it's in decor or design, but you can actually go to Target and buy macrame plant
yeah.
hangers or things like that. I think even my daughter has the little itsy bitsy tiny macrame plant holder thing hanging from her
From
rearview
the
mirror in her
car window.
car,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Which don't you think? I mean, that is really just the flip side of our digital world now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a whole generation of people kind of in between maybe your daughter and us that may have missed out on that kind of experience. But I think by now,
Yeah.
people have seen the digital era, they know what it's about, they probably participate in it, but they also need that old school kind of hands-on experience in some
Mm-hmm.
way. Um, I didn't mention crochet, but that was a huge part of my personal life as well. And that's really big right now with younger people too. So I love that it kind of has come full circle for me. I'm seeing a lot of that kind of interest in crafts again. It's
Who
fun.
taught you how to crochet, or did you teach yourself?
Well, I when I was young, my mom worked at the Woolworth store in Brookings, and during the
Okay.
day, I needed to stay with my grandma, who lived in Aurora, South Dakota.
Ah,
She's a real big inspiration in a lot of my creative life, even though she was a farm lady, and I mean, she and my grandpa had moved to town. They didn't think of themselves at all as creative, but
but
every
think of all the things as being out on the farm, a farm wife had to do to with their
yeah,
hands to create
yeah,
and
all the
make. So
stuff they
yeah.
had to come up with on their own.
Right.
But every day after lunch, she would sit down with her crochet and we would just burn through soap operas. So
Oh,
I can
oh,
still
okay.
tell you the cast of Guiding Light. All of that was just ingrained in me. And it was like, I mean, it was a couple of hours. We spent some time. But
Right.
during that time, she taught me to crochet. And I think my mom would have probably, but my mother is left-handed and I'm right-handed. And when
Mm.
it comes to crocheting, that's a hindrance to learn to crochet from someone
Oh,
whose hand is the opposite of yours.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so my grandma taught me to crochet and I was fairly young, I would say. I mean, under 10. I don't know how
Wow.
old I was, but I've kind of kept that on and off my whole life as well.
Hmm. What was
So,
your grandma's name?
Elizabeth.
Grandma Elizabeth. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was very pre-YouTube. So you couldn't YouTube learn how to crochet. We learned those things from our grandmas.
Yeah, we really
Yeah.
did. Yeah, we really did.
How do you think all of this, when you think of, so did you go, when you went to SDSU, did you have design in mind, graphic design? You knew that's what you were going to do. How did you grow into that?
Well, graphic design, even that phrase itself, like for me, that wasn't, I didn't even know what that was. I had no idea.
Oh,
So graduating from high school, I knew that I was kind of nervous about college. And my cousin and I were actually the first people in our extended family to even go to college. So college wasn't a given, but I kind
mm.
of knew that I wanted to do that. And I just couldn't think of what I wanted to be. Like I really hadn't thought through. So my first semester, I actually was a landscape major.
Oh,
And it was really into my first semester that I was like, you know what, though? I mean, studying soil and biology, like I love plants, but I don't know about this. I look back and I think I probably, if I had stuck with it, I probably could have made it in that field. But in my second semester, I changed to basically a graphic design major. And I would say there was about zero relation to what I've actually done in my life as a graphic
mm.
designer because we didn't have the computer,
Oh,
the
yeah.
early 80s, everything was just by hand. And so maybe there were maybe some principles that were applied, but that's where I mean, I guess I learned more about the practice of design. But before that, I didn't know what it was.
Typically, do you kind of hand draw type first? Do you do that where you're like, I'm thinking of this logo or this brand? Do you start
Yeah.
with pencil and paper?
I don't anymore.
No. Okay.
I mean, a lot of designers do still. I'll do my sketching basically on the computer or just like
Okay.
throw out a lot of ideas on the computer. I do still sketch in a notebook as well, but I find when
Mm,
I'm really actually really have some ideas in my mind and I need to get them down quickly, I do work on the computer. But that's not been my whole history as a designer
sure.
because I didn't always have a computer. So I think
No.
I've done a little of both. But
Hmm.
had I stayed with that practice of sketching in a notebook, I mean, I think my illustration skills would be more evolved than they are. And
Yeah.
kind of my coworkers and my, compatriots that are my age that have been doing this a long time, the ones that are really skilled at illustration probably still do the notebook first.
When you went, so you graduated from SDSU and then you stayed at SDSU for work, and then eventually you went to Sioux Falls.
Yeah.
What was that path like for you? How'd you get into the graphic design? And you eventually became creative director, right, at Lawrence and Schiller?
Yeah, I think kind of the thing about being a designer that people outside of marketing or a profession as a designer, they don't really understand that at least half of being a designer, if not more, comes from the strategy behind what you're doing
Mm,
and how that connects with what the client needs to achieve. So it isn't design isn't really about design. It is about strategy. It is about the thinking that goes behind what you see in a logo. And what you see in a logo is, not very much when you think about it. I mean, they're simple, right? Like the basics of a Target logo is it's a bullseye. It's a red bullseye. That's it.
hmm.
But
But think of
all,
how many hours and talks and conversations and reviews and
yeah,
the strategy exactly. I mean, it could have
yeah.
taken a couple years to get to that.
Yeah. So for an introverted overthinker who also likes design, I think that was cultivated for me before I ever stepped foot in an advertising agency.
Mm,
Um, and I think it's been helpful. It's been helpful to my career. I still hadn't worked on a computer when I started working at Lawrence and Schiller.
wow.
So that was a huge learning curve to learn kind of the processes of an ad agency. I was like 1,000% sure that I would hate it.
Oh, really?
I was not at all jazzed about becoming a marketing person. And I think if you think about that, the uncomfortableness of being in a place where your skill set is really not developed is something that is I'm very grateful for now. And I,
Hmm.
I feel in some ways that we sort of now feel like we have to be super prepared, or that we already know everything by the time we get a job. And I didn't know anything. Like I literally knew so very little about marketing, about advertising. I mean, I knew that I thought about what people wanted, what I did think about that, even when I was at STSU. If a professor needed some graphics to teach their class, I had to think about what would visualize what they're
Oh.
trying to teach. And so that part, that piece, is what has brought me through to today, where I have my own company. And the design part just kind of always evolves. Like, sometimes I'm a great designer, and a lot of times I'm like, oh, design is hard. I think it comes and goes and ebbs and flows for people. But the thinking about people and really at the heart of it, trying to figure out how to visualize what's inside of them is
Hmm.
important. And I don't know that you can really teach that deeply. At least I wasn't taught it deeply, but I
Right.
learned along the way.
Because I'm not a designer, I know what I like when I see it, but I don't know how to ask for what I want. So when you and I first started talking, let's just use my logo for Random Sweets, for example. I could tell you things that I liked if I saw other people's and such, but there's like you will go back to this. There's so much that goes behind. You are so good about thinking what you just said. What does this company want? What are they trying to say? How do they want people to feel when they see visually? They don't know anything about you, but it's what you see. And you are so good about drawing that out in people because it is about people. And
Mhm.
yes, it's about a company, but you have to work with people to get that message through visually. And so all these years that you've spent doing that, but what I want to say is for those people who think that they can go on Canva or do something on the computer to just create a logo, it's not okay.
Yeah,
There's a reason why these people are professionals and they know how to package visually and in colors and messaging in a brand, what that means going forward, even the types of files that they give to you when they're finished. It's a huge thing. So I just I want to pull that out because I used Canva to create some different designs, but if I didn't have professionally made logos and branding from you, it would look
right.
sloppy and it would look cheap and it would look unprofessional. And a lot of times you can tell that. So I just want to throw that out there for you.
Well, that was a little bit of a of a volley to me. It's funny that you said I know what I like when I see it. And I would say that's the beginning of working with a designer. And a lot of times I will ask people, well, tell me about what you like. Like, what are you drawn to? What are things that, I'll have a little questionnaire that
Yep.
gets at the heart of, well, what does this person like visually? But if I go all the way back to my very first time that I worked with people outside of the advertising agency, and I don't think it's cool these days to do it, but back in the day at Lawrence and Schiller, if we wanted to do a side project, I just had to get approval from my boss. And then if as long as it wasn't, another hospital, because I was working at
Oh,
the hospital, as long as it wasn't anything in competition, they would say,
mm-hmm.
sure, go ahead and do
Oh,
it. So that was my first like foray into what I call freelancing now or having my own business. And the name of that company, even before I left Lawrence and Schiller, was 180 Creative. And that's not very creative, but the behind the scenes of that name was that I had gotten used to the idea of working with clients in an ad agency saying to me, wow, that's not something I ever would have thought of, but I love it. And I think that so it was a 180 from
mm-hmm.
what someone was expecting. And I think there's something to that. Because as a designer, yes, you want to know what the person already kind of has in their mind, but you also want to think about things that they haven't thought about.
Mm-hmm.
The mistake that most people make when they're hiring a designer is that they are just trying to have it be reflective of themselves. But the reality is, if you're selling any kind of product or service to anybody, it's not about you personally, it's about the people that you're speaking with.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to go a little bit further out than just, oh, I like this color palette or I like this. And those things are important, but they're not the full story. And so my joy in being a designer is like cultivating all the little tidbits and putting them together in a way that maybe you would say, oh, I never thought of that.
Exactly. Yep.
That's the thing that a designer can do that I think Canva alone can't do unless
Mm-hmm.
you're already doing that work yourself, which some people are. And so that's
Sure.
why, everyone's different. Some people can naturally do that on their own and don't need a designer, but a lot of people do.
Yeah,
So,
I'm not one of those people, so I'm thankful for you.
and a lot of what I do, I mean, on a daily basis is just experimentation.
Mm,
So playing with letter forms, playing with shapes. Like I very rarely have like I can have a really rough sketch or an idea in my mind of what I want to put together, but it takes experimentation. So you're right. Like anyone can sit down and type a font out and it can look really good. But what are you going to do with it then? Like, what else are you going to add in that's going to make you stand out, and feel like it's you? And very
Mm-hmm.
rarely is that just a font that you typed on the computer.
Or
Um,
one that you've purchased from like myfonts.com or something like that.
yeah,
That's not the
yeah,
same either.
it's
And you
part of
can't use
it.
it. You
Yeah.
can't use it in all the places, and people don't know that there's ways to use things for, what you've taught me. Like there's web fonts and there's things that a website or Google may or may not recognize. And
Yeah.
us
Yeah.
non-designers, we don't even know that when we're starting something. So,
Over the years, that has changed a lot as well. Like back maybe even 5 or 10 years ago, most people didn't have any grounding or knowledge in any of these things we're talking about. So they would naturally need a designer. The good
mhm.
part about today is there are online tools and there are ways that you can create a brand or a logo or whatever you need to do, you can do it by yourself. So if you have that natural
Wow.
curiosity, you are able to do it. And I'm going to be the first one to tell you if that's the right thing for you.
Hmm.
Um, because not every job is meant to be mine. Not everyone wants
Sure.
to, go through the full process of building a brand, and that's okay too.
Right. Well, I'll stay in the kitchen and let you be the designer. So
Yeah, that
we have a partnership
that
for
sounds like
life here.
yeah, I think we have a pretty good balance there.
So how did it transition from you're at Lawrence and Schiller, and then so by the time when I met you, you were doing design and you owned your own company called Pie in the
Yeah,
Sky Studios, and
yeah,
you were also doing a fun side thing
yeah,
that with thrifting and having a booth and reselling. So take us to that part of your next eras and what you're doing
yeah.
now.
So yeah, I left Lawrence and Schiller after I think it was about 8 years. And looking back, I think the thought was that I had just sort of tapped out my potential there. I was an associate creative director at the time, and I don't, it was time to go.
Hmm.
That's the simple answer
Hmm.
there. But I really hadn't planned on having my own business. That
Oh.
sort of fell into place, which was great. And I would say the first couple of years, I barely had enough income to make it, but I liked what I was doing. I liked that people would just call me and need a thing and I could do it. That whole like working on your own and being your own business. It
Hmm.
is it is not natural for me, but now it's a little late for me to be anything else. So, yeah, so that's been my gig now for a long time, a lot longer than I worked for someone else. I've worked for
Yeah.
myself. And it's awesome. Like it really is. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, like people who are doing a new business and trying out something new, and it's kind of addictive. It makes me want to also think about my own life and my own interests. And that's kind of how the thrifting thing started, is that I loved repurposing things. I loved going to thrift stores and seeing what I could find. And then I started to realize that other people love that as well. And maybe I could build a little side hustle, and
Hmm.
it's been very modest. And it's been a great ride. I'm actually in the process now, right now, of downsizing that a little bit. So I'm not going to have a booth anymore where I'm having to stock it, monthly. But I'm sure I'll still, in some capacity, I'll have my vintage business. I'll do what I call pop-up shops where
Yeah.
people can like come to my house and I've got it all set up and shop. And that has been really gratifying. So it will
Which
continue. Yeah.
good, which reminds me too of your plant pop-ups. Like you've had even just pop-ups that are little plants. So
Yeah.
how did that come about?
Well, I mean, that's part of the grandma saga of her having like a kitchen window just full of little cuttings of all this stuff,
Yeah.
you know. And so learning how to propagate plants and how to use what you have basically. And then you have a new plant if you propagate one, a house plant, and you can give it to someone. That's just my jam. I love that. In fact, I gave away a couple of monsteras last week, and but then I get nervous. It's like, okay, but you have to take care of it. They're almost like animals to me, and I
Right.
get nervous. But yeah,
I
so
mean,
sometimes when I get too many plants, I can just do a quick pop up and talk to wonderful people who also love plants.
so you don't make people fill out like adoption certificates or
No,
paperwork for your plants.
I do tell them though, if it looks like it's dying, just come back to my house and I
Oh my
will talk
gosh.
about it.
Oh
I
my
have been
gosh.
a plant hospital for friends.
Bobby's plant ER.
Yeah, exactly. It's another 70s thing though.
Mhm.
Houseplants and the fact that they're so popular right now, that's another throwback to that era. And I mean, houseplants were huge in the 70s, and people had greenhouses that were, on the side of their house that were
Oh
filled with
yeah.
jungles of plants. And
Hmm.
so it's very cool to see that back. And I hope that that stays, because
Yeah.
it's a fun pastime. And I think plants make you happy, right? Like, especially
So,
here in the winter. I mean, people always are like, oh, you're such a plant person. How do you keep them from dying? And the simple answer to that is I do not. Some of them die, and that's
mm,
part of it. But when you have like 60, 70 plants in your
oh my
house,
gosh.
people don't think that some of them die.
It's okay
But
to lose a
you know,
few.
they're a living thing, and sometimes I just don't get it right. But a lot of times I do. And it's part of that curiosity. It's part of that
Mhm.
whole creative vibe that we kind of started out talking about. There is nothing better than when your little baby plant gets a new leaf,
Yeah.
unfurling, and you're like, well, what did I do right? I'm going to
Right.
keep doing it,
Do people
and
do people who know you bring plants to you and say, I can't do this, or
yeah.
we had a
You
funeral and there's all these
It's
plants.
a
We don't know what to do
funeral.
with them.
It's funeral plants.
Yeah.
Just give your funeral plants to your plant loving friends and they'll revive them if they can. And then sometimes
Yeah.
they can't, and that's okay too. But
Hmm.
that's where people, are like, I don't even really want this thing, but I feel the pressure of
Yeah.
having to keep it alive because it was, at my grandma's funeral. And it's like,
Hmm.
yeah, I do get gifts of plants occasionally. I like it.
So with your thrifting, do you have, so you recently, well, in the last year, so you've been asked to do some presentations. You started writing an article for
Yeah.
which
Etc.
magazine?
magazine,
The
etc.
Etc.
Yeah,
magazine. Okay.
yeah.
And those are really interesting. So if you go online to the Etc. magazine, you can read the archived articles that you started writing, which was back, was it August or September last year in
Yeah, it was
2023?
last summer. I think August was
First one.
my first issue. So it's
Yeah,
published monthly. My friend
sure.
Angela is the publisher of the magazine, and she's also a thrifter. So it was a good match for us
Right.
to take this on. It's really fun. It does kind of force me to think about the rationale behind why I love old things,
Hmm.
instead of just doing it for yourself, you're like passing on knowledge to other people. And so that's kind of this new season, I guess I'm in as far as thrifting goes. And it's great because people want to talk about that, especially in our consumeristic society. Everything's so built around being a consumer. And I think especially young people see that and they want to do it differently.
Hmm.
So it's great to talk with people about how I approach that. And, I'm by no means an expert at that, but I feel like I have a few decades into learning to make beautiful things out of things that someone else used previously, whether it's
Yeah.
clothing or, decor or functional items that you need for your kitchen. I just really believe in it. And so it's been fun to do classes and magazine articles. Yeah.
Yeah, it turns out you're actually a really good writer as well. I know you're like, whatever, but
Oh, yeah. I
you
wish you,
are. And those
why
articles
don't
are
you write? Why don't I just tell you about it and you write the
you,
story?
no,
I would
no,
love
no,
that.
because it comes best from you who knows how to do it. Your writing is
Oh my
wonderful and it
gosh.
makes me turn the page and then go, "Oh, that was all. I want more."
You know,
And you, in
that,
general, what I've learned when we're talking about making things beautiful, you're also very good at photography as well. I'm going to stick that in there, but you're like my sister Heidi, who I was explaining to her the other day. You are just kind of like her, where you just make the world more beautiful. Wherever you've been, wherever Bobby's been, wherever Heidi's been, there's just beauty left there somehow, whether it's in your home or somewhere else that you've been. It's great.
yeah, and ultimately, I guess maybe taking those photos, is probably my favorite part of writing a magazine
Oh,
article.
really?
Um, yeah,
It's good.
I think though there is something to be said for, I think because you and I had talked when you started podcasting, it was a new thing and you wanted to
Yeah.
do it, but you have to dig into something that you're not comfortable with. And
Hmm.
creativity quite often, almost always, I think starts there, starts in discomfort. So it's not
Hmm.
totally natural for me to write a magazine article or to teach a class about thrifting. But at the same time, that's how you grow your own curiosity, your own creativity. And
Hmm.
also, sometimes it's not the right thing for you. Sometimes you say, okay, I don't enjoy this and I'm not going to do this. And that's okay as well. And I really don't like it when we call that a failure.
Yeah.
Exploration and trying new things and then them not working out isn't failure.
Or
You just
finding out you just don't
yeah,
like it in general. I
yeah,
have a craft room. I'm doing air quotes, so everybody know
yeah,
I'm doing air
yeah,
quotes. It's called the
yeah,
craft room. Spare
yeah,
bedroom in our upstairs that it's full of scrapbooking stuff, and
yeah,
I've never really scrapbooked. So I need
yeah,
to get rid of it all because it's something
yeah,
I enjoyed the purchasing and the idea of it and the beauty of what things look like when they're finished and all the patterns of the
yeah,
papers. I loved all that, but the physical sitting down
yeah.
and being able to do that. So it's not a failure. I just realized, oh, I guess I don't like that.
I have a great example of that in my own life. It just came up. A friend of mine from high school, and she and I used to sit together in art class in high school and do our little art projects. So we've known each other a long time, but she she posted on Facebook this gorgeous paint by number of butterflies and they were all so pretty and she's like I'm not very good at this and it was completed. She completed a paint by number and it was looked
Mm.
kind of big. I mean, I couldn't really tell. And I told her, oh my gosh, that is gorgeous. And she's like, well, you're creative. You can totally do one of these. I said, no, I actually got a paint by number as a gift a couple years ago. And it was this artist I love, a Minnesota artist. Her name escapes me now, but she
Is
had
it
done
Cindy?
Cindy Lindgren.
Yeah. She does a lot of really neat
I mean, she's
Scandinavian.
great, right? She's
Mhm.
great. And the thing was great. And I finally pulled it out over the Christmas holiday this year. And I'm like, I'm going to do paint by number. I've been thrifting them and buying them for years. I love paint by number. I love the idea of it.
Mhm.
I sat down and I mean, Stacey, I put in like 2 hours, 2 solid hours of actually trying really hard. I mean, the paint was lumpy, it was globbing, the little sections were so tiny. They were so small. And I was like, I'll just try again tomorrow. And then sometime between that and tomorrow, I was like, you know what? I'm throwing this thing in the trash. I am not. I am not a paint by number lady. And that was okay. I mean, it's just
Right.
fine. I
Experiment.
did try it.
Hmm.
And I would have loved if I would have been able to complete it, but it was not fun. It was not fun. So I think that's part of this, it's the realness of living a creative life is so much about that. Like not everything is gonna be perfect.
And your home is, you and I similar. We spend a lot of time at home because we do our work from our home. And how do you make your home a haven?
I think that part of the reason that I'm giving up my booth and some of the thrifting is that I
Mhm.
started to like collect these bins of things that individually or I was drawn to them. But I find that in my home, I have to go through like a mental editing process kind of all the time. Like I'm kind of, because
Oh,
I'm such a visual person, I need to have like visual stimulation, but it can't be overstimulation. So I think my problem is probably maybe opposite of some people in that I tend to have too many vignettes, too many little areas of design things, and then I have to edit it back. And that's kind of what being a designer is. It does kind of relate to my job where I'll have all kinds of ideas and then you have to narrow it down. That's my home as well.
Mhm.
But I mean, I love my home. I love my collection of plants. I love the thrifted things. I love the artwork that I've collected over the years that remind me of places that I've been or people that I love. I love my cat who, hangs out with me all day long. And I love being at home. I think that's something that I have always been a person who loves to just create my own little world. And so for me, that's what this is, and I feel very grateful to be a homebody and to have the home that I want to live in, which is not fancy, is not big, is not always clean and organized, but it's just a great feeling. Is that a
I
haven? Yes.
Yes, it is. And I like how you change things up. We were talking earlier, you and I, about even just gathering your things and sort of replacing where you put things and where you're building your vignettes. The credenza.
Yeah.
The top of that you redesign often sort
Oh,
of
yeah.
seasonally.
Yeah.
And
The top of anything. Any piece of furniture is like a setting for things that are
and people
pretty.
like me forget. We'll put something there, like above our
Yeah.
kitchen cupboards or whatever. And then every 3 years, when you host Christmas, you wipe it all down
Yeah.
and leave the same
No,
things up there. You would never
no.
do that. You're always just redoing everything, sort of like a store.
Yeah. One of the top moments of my life, and I'm not kidding when I say this, was getting a house with a fireplace mantle. Now, do I do the fireplace? No, not really. In fact, it's
What?
broken right now.
Oh,
I need to get it serviced. But having a mantle, and that means that it's like a blank canvas whenever you want to redo
oh,
it. That's the best. That's the best. There probably will be a magazine article about mantle decoration
oh, that's
because
a great idea.
I do feel like that those are the things in your home. And if you're someone that's not natural to like
Hmm.
think like that, I mean, then pick one or two places that you're intentional about changing up seasonally, or don't let 3 years go by and have the same old stuff sitting there
Right.
because it
And
doesn't mean anything to you at that point. It's not
yeah,
stimulating anything, any kind of positive feelings for you then. And I think the point of having your home as a haven is to have things that surround you that you do have good feelings about. So,
yeah.
but for people who don't naturally like that kind of task, I still think picking some spaces that you can make feel good to you
Hmm.
is really important. a few years back, I was kind of on a prayer team for a house here in Sioux Falls where women came to live. It was kind of a temporary stop for them. Maybe they had been in prison or had been homeless on the streets, whatever. And part of what I learned through that process is that almost everyone wants to have a home that feels like a haven. And so part of what happened there and the people that lived in this house that were just amazing is, they would each woman would have like her own room and would be able to paint or, find things that they liked and decorate with. And that's where I really saw that for a lot of people, they don't get a choice about their surroundings and, how they're going to be affected by their surroundings. And I think I really saw the importance of a home and what that means. And that's one side of the spectrum, but the other side is someone who builds a new home, a very expensive home, and then just puts a bunch of stuff in it,
Yeah.
whatever's trending or
Whatever
whatever.
matches at the furniture store.
Yeah, like right now
Yeah.
we're coming out of that neutral zone that has existed for, in my mind, far too long. I'll just say this, but with no color because that wasn't in. And then
Hmm.
I just can't help but think that that's not creating a feeling of comfort. And so I think for all of
Yeah.
us, really, to try to figure out what that is, that feeling is that we want to achieve, it's a great thing.
Well, speaking of homes, let's move into the kitchen of the home and talk about some food or
Yes.
gardening. Yeah, you talked about gardening earlier, and every year it seems like you have a new section or little area of your outdoors that you're trying to improve, clean up, add more plants, add more flowers. That's fun.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
you garden, are you growing some vegetables?
I have, kind of ever since I've had a yard, I have grown vegetables. And I think that's just kind of a natural thing that you want to do if you have a garden. But this year I'm actually really considering like cutting way back on that. I did dig up some new lawn space last fall, and I'm really excited to grow more flowers.
Okay.
I want to dry flowers. I think that's going to be just so fun. And also, I think it's okay. I love going to the farmers market, and I love even just the idea of trading plants and things like that. Like a lot of
Oh,
people that
yeah.
do grow vegetables are they're loving to, share. And it's like, I'm totally okay with that. I think you don't have to necessarily grow your own tomatoes in order to
Mm-mm.
can tomatoes if that's what you want to do. Last fall, I got super into the idea of I know how to make apple butter and I love gifting apple butter and I love eating apple butter. It's something I learned again when I was really young. But I was just buying apples. Like I don't have a tree. And it was fine. It was totally fine to do that. And I still got the joy of making the apple butter and I gave away
Yeah.
things for Christmas. So I guess I'm not so like earth crunchy that I have to do that everything has to be done by me. So I think that's kind of my take on it this year is I'm going to do more. I'm sure I'll probably have a couple of tomato plants. Like that would be really hard not to have in my yard and you can go out and pick one for your salad.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm excited to grow more flowers and I'm really hoping that I can do some dried flower stuff maybe next fall.
So
So
I'm going to go back to apple butter in a second, but first I was going to ask you just what you said. So you want to do more flowers, more dry flowers.
yeah.
I think I saw, did you, I don't know, I think you just went outside and went, "Oh, these things are dry and not growing anymore because it's fall and I'm just going to whip together this beautiful wreath."
Yeah, and it
It
kind of
was
got me going.
gorgeous.
But I
Are you going to
also
do
did
more?
buy dried flowers. So
Oh,
Alyssa's flower farm she's great. And
okay.
she's in Iowa. I don't want to say Rock Valley. I don't know those rocks in Iowa. Rock Valley, I think.
Okay.
anyway, it's a farm, and Alyssa and her husband have a flower farm, and she sells her products at the farmers market in by Falls Park.
Oh, okay.
Also, I think at Looks Market. There are
Sure. Love
some
that
other
place.
places in town that she sells her stuff, and she has beautiful dried flowers in the fall. And so I bought some things from her and made a wreath. She also sells wreaths. I mean, if you don't want to do the whole thing, but I did, and oh my gosh, so fun. And so
Mhm.
part stuff from my own yard and part stuff that I bought. It was great
Okay.
fun. And I would still do that, I mean, I still like seeing what other artists are basically doing, and making something with someone else's work is fine with me.
Mhm.
So,
Right. So
yeah.
apple butter, Jason and I love apple butter. And if
Yeah.
you're making it, that means you have a recipe
I have a
for the,
great crock pot recipe that I'll share with you.
oh, in the crock
Um,
pot even? Woo, I think I
yeah.
could do that.
And there's a lot of crock pot recipes out there, but mine is a little bit different, I think. I think a lot of people make apple butter way too sweet. Like it's not jam, like it needs to taste like apples.
Hmm.
So mine's a little bit different, but yeah. And the key to good apple butter, besides the taste, is you want that dark brown, like caramely color.
Yeah.
And that it kind of depends on the apple, I think, whether or not you can get that. And so, yeah, I'm
What
good.
does the brown come from? I assumed it was cinnamon or something.
It is from cinnamon as well. And I think it's too from the length of time that the apple
Oh.
butter is cooking. So it needs to cook for a while.
So I'm going to say something that will expose my lack of knowledge in preserving and canning, which I think is just fine because I love apple butter. I have this canning book that I checked out from the library the other day because I'm becoming more curious about this and trying to learn. And there's
Yeah.
recipes in there. I'm like, wait a minute, apple butter doesn't have butter in it.
Oh, yeah, I
I
think people
thought
think
I
that.
thought there must be butter, and now I realize there's no
Yeah.
butter in apple butter.
Yeah, all fruit butter is, I don't know why it's called butter. To be honest, I don't know the history behind that, but
Yeah,
fruit butters are just taking the fruit and condensing it down to more condensed flavor.
thicker. Yeah,
Yeah, and that thickens it up. It like self thickens, I guess. So yeah, apple butter is not butter.
right. So good. You'll share your recipe and I'll put that on
Cool.
randomsweets.com for everybody. And the other thing I'm going to do
Yeah.
too is as I'm thinking back to some of your thrifting tips and such, you did a really good but what it was short, so I liked it was what 15 minutes. I don't know. The time got away from me because you're so interesting to listen to, but for Ollie in Sioux Falls. And I can share that link in the show notes
Oh,
and
yeah,
then on
that
the
would be
blog
great.
post.
Yeah, it was like a 20-minute talk, I think. So not long.
It didn't seem long. Like again, I'm
Yeah.
saying all of a sudden it's over. I'm like, wait, I want to hear more.
Yeah.
So you're
Yeah.
you're giving some food gifts, which is also
Yeah.
very creative and
So my deal with food is I eat like a single girl on a daily basis, which is I'm not going to share my diet with you, but it's not a lot of home cooked meals or super complicated meals. But I do love hosting people for like brunches or coffee
oh,
dates. So I do love making desserts. And I was hoping maybe I would share. I'm kind of semi-famous for my carrot cake, which carrot cake is like
ooh,
the easiest thing in the world. It's my mom's recipe. And
oh,
like next week, a friend of mine is having a birthday, and she won't hear this probably. Well, I just won't tell her, even if it's out there. But so I have her gift ready, and we're getting together and spending some time together, and I will make carrot cake cupcakes, not only
mm,
for her birthday, but she has two boys that are in college, and they love this homemade cake. So I'm gonna make a batch, and then she gets
yeah.
it up. And so I love doing desserts, like homemade grandma desserts.
Mhm. Does that one have a cream cheese frosting?
Yes, it does. Which
Yeah.
of course, it's got like an inch of frosting.
The best part.
a friend of mine a few years back, she and I both kind of have this dessert thing, and we learned, when we were younger, someone at her work, she brought cupcakes or cake at one point, and one of her coworkers, younger coworkers, said, "My gosh, this frosting is so great." And she was like, "Well, yeah, I mean, frosting's pretty easy." And the girl said, I just have never found, like, what brand is this?"
What brand?
My friend said, "It's homemade." And she said, "You can homemade frosting?"
That's about as funny as me thinking there's butter and apple butter, right? We don't know
Right. But
everything.
honestly, if that's not something that you learn, you're not going to know it.
Sure.
That it's
Yeah.
such an easy thing. And so, I mean, yeah, every single
Yeah.
human being knows how it needs to know how to make homemade frosting, right?
Oh, I agree because it is so easy, whether it's a powdered sugar frosting with a little bit of butter
Yeah.
and milk, and then you put your vanilla or maple extract,
Yeah.
whatever, or
I
if you're
mean, at
doing
the
your cream
very least,
cheese with some, I mean,
yes.
it can take what, 10 minutes max and a hand
And
mixer.
I think, Stacey, that would be a great class for you to teach is what things does it really make a difference, between
Hmm.
buying that can in the grocery store and making your own. And I do really feel like sometimes it doesn't make a difference. Like you can't really tell the difference. I can't tell a huge difference between a can of tomatoes in the grocery store and the ones that I make from tomatoes.
Mm,
I mean, there might be a little difference, but it's not, to
hmm.
me, it's not a major thing. But there are some things that you can do and make a huge difference. And frosting is
Right.
one of them. Like it's just like hands down, everyone can make it. Just
Yep.
do,
Even
right?
if you're making a box cake mix,
Oh yeah, I
even
do
if you're
that
starting
all
with
the
a box
time.
cake
Yep,
mix, but using homemade
yep,
frosting, you can have
yes,
that frosting made faster than it does to make the cake, and you can't even put it on until it cools. So
yep.
it just doesn't
In
even take any
fact,
time.
I knew for a few years, I knew that there was a kind of a recipe hack. Maybe you tried this, but it's like a wedding cake hack that you use a boxed cake mix with. Have you heard of that?
It's ringing a bell, but it's not anything I've done.
You just
So,
add a bunch of stuff to the box, basically, and it's supposedly,
oh,
I don't know what makes it wedding cake, except I think that one ingredient in these hacks is almond extract. And I
yeah.
want to say that that's probably the thing that makes people think wedding cake. Anyway,
Hmm.
a good, like, someone that I've loved for lots of years, the guy that fixed my computer over all the years, he retired in December, and I wanted to drop off some cupcakes at his workplace. And I tried that wedding cake hack. And I will tell you, those are the best cupcakes I've ever made in my life. And they start with a white cake mix box,
Hmm.
69 cents.
I
And then
always,
you add flour and you just add some stuff to it. I think sour
yeah.
cream maybe is like a
Hmm.
special thing. And then the almond extract. It was so great.
Yep. A lot of
Yeah.
my cakes do start with the box cake
Oh
mix,
yeah,
and
that's a
then you're
random
right.
sweets.
sh-
Yeah. Thing.
um sour cream or like the
Yeah.
pistachio cake that Jason and I love. I just made it this last weekend, and you're starting with a yellow cake mix and you
Yeah.
add sour cream and 2 boxes of pistachio pudding
Yeah.
mix.
I saw
But a
your
lot of them.
recipe and I bought some pistachio pudding. It's like,
Oh,
okay, I gotta make this. It's
it is
so yummy.
so good. And if you don't want to put the Di Serono amaretto liqueur in there, you can use
You
almond
can use
extract.
almond,
Yeah, you can
yeah,
use almond
which I
extract,
might
but
because I don't have any amaretto in my
yeah.
house right now. But yeah, so yeah, I love doing that. I love like making a fun cake or cupcakes or and having people over or dropping them off at someone's birthday. I mean, really,
Oh, mm-hmm.
that's such a great gift. Like it's
Yep.
so easy and so fun. And I feel like that's a way to take this creative life that we've been talking about into what you do as far as food. And I'm
Yeah.
not saying you shouldn't go to your cupcake shop and buy cupcakes for people. I'm just saying for yourself, sometimes take it a little bit further, and
Mhm.
try some of these things in the kitchen And I think you're going to not only still gift the person, but you're going to enjoy that process. It just feels good to make things, it
Hmm.
feels good to be creative. And it doesn't have to be being a designer like I am. You can do that in any area of your life.
Just like making decorated cookies. I
Yep.
don't do that. I leave that to
Nope.
Stacy from Figtails, which
Yeah.
reminds me when we're
Yeah.
talking about that wedding cake, when she came to record an episode, she brought this bottle of a special magical potion. I'm like, what
Oh,
is this? And she started talking about, and she called it something, and I can't remember what it was. And she said, well, basically, it's the wedding cake flavor. When people think about wedding cake from
oh,
back in the day, and it's a unique combination of, I think she said it's a mix of almond extract, vanilla, and lemon. And those three come together to make this very unique when people taste. So I'm
well,
guessing
so
that
there
your
you
almond
go.
is the right, yeah. So
Yeah.
she brought
And
me some. I need
yeah.
to
Well,
keep
in
using it.
pigtails, I mean, honestly, she's next level. Like that
Oh
truly
my
is
gosh.
an art, and that's
Yeah.
different than what I'm talking about. That's not what
I know
my,
that's no, that's why I'm saying I'm not doing that. Yeah, you
but
got
I
to go
still
to
think like experimenting on your own and not having the expectation that you have to be what she is, which is
right.
amazing, is still, I mean, there's still value in it and there's still joy in it. And maybe you're just serving your family or, you don't have to. We do kind of fast food lane, even that, and I
Yeah.
think sometimes I think it's a little sad that we don't have time, and I'm not a mom, I know that time is limited for a lot of people, but I just think there's something to like having those couple of hours where your brain can kind of just experiment with something you haven't done before or
Hmm.
something that you'd like to learn, right? I was going to share too, because I mostly probably make desserts when I'm thinking about gatherings and things like that. But just coming off of like the Super Bowl or winter time gatherings, I also have this great appetizer. And that's another area where I think you can just play around and they can be
Hmm.
super easy. Like it doesn't need to be something complicated, but the recipe that I make quite often when I have a gathering where I don't want to bring a dessert, they're called sausage wontons. And
Ooh,
have you ever heard of that? And they're made with the wonton wrappers that you can buy like at Hy-Vee. Um, so you start with that and you just kind of fold them up and put them in mini cupcake tins. So
oh,
and then you bake those for just a couple minutes. Then you make like a sausage mixture, cheese and sausage and ranch
cheese and
dressing.
ranch. Oh my gosh, come on.
Those, honestly, I have never
Okay.
met a human being who doesn't love those.
Right.
So,
Is it
like things like that. And then I just have the one. I don't have like a repertoire of appetizers. But if I need to bring, it's like I know I can make those. I know that those are going to go over well. I will not be bringing any home.
hmm
It's just great. It's great to have a couple back pocket things. So many things. Well, that's why your website and your blog is so great because I think it is really approachable for people who aren't like comfortable with calling themselves a baker or someone
Yeah.
who
Mm.
spends a lot of time in the kitchen. Like just give it a go.
Right. Well, do you have any other recipes that you're going to share? I will do the carrot cake
Well,
recipe, the
yeah,
apple butter, the sausage
and the
wontons.
sausage
I'm
wontons.
so
I think
excited.
those are great. Yeah, and super simple and kind of fun to share. So,
We're going to wrap it up. We're going to come to the end here a little bit, but I want to make sure though that we kind of covered a lot of these different eras, but now you're looking forward to what are the next 10, 20, 30 years going to be for you, Bobbi, and
yeah.
your curiosity. Where are things going to take you? You are closing down the booth that you've had for thrifting for selling, but you're not going to stop thrifting.
No,
And you and I, do not forget, we're going to spend a day doing that this summer together.
I know. We
Yeah.
are going to, and possibly then you'll show up in a magazine article because that would be I'm hoping this year to invite people out with me because I do think that everything can be like an adventure. And so taking a friend
Right.
out thrifting is one way to like not feel like it's just about consumerism, but
Yeah.
experiences, which leads me into that's, I think, the place that I'm at in life is wanting more time spent on experiences, no matter what that looks like. And so we've talked a little bit about, about what you're doing here. You're sharing with people, and it's about relationship and it's about how
Hmm.
people are fashioning their lives, around the table and more. And I think that that's kind of where I'm at too. Like, I want to do those kinds of more valuable things other than just something I purchased or even something that I designed, and I do love designing. I don't plan on quitting in any
Hmm.
fashion. But I think, I don't know, my word, do you do the word for a year thing that some people do? Yeah.
I don't because I can't make decisions.
I'm
So
bad at it. Like I'll
it would
pick
take me the
one
whole year.
and then I don't remember what I picked or whatever, but it's only February and I still kind of am thinking about the word that I picked was curiosity, which now that I'm looking back, I mean, it's not really a new thing in my life, kind of how I've approached a lot of my life.
But now you have an answer if somebody asks you if you have a word for the year.
Yeah, and
Right?
I even beyond that, I was thinking about it for this conversation that you and I were going to have, and I was like, I wonder what would happen if. So it's more of a statement.
Oh,
And what that does, that's different than just general curiosity, is like every day or every week, most of us have incoming that it's not something that we've done before, or maybe it's uncomfortable relationships, like someone that you are having a problem with, or something that makes you not want to do it, which I
hmm.
have that happen all the time. I mean, if I'm being 100% vulnerable, where I'm just like, no, I don't want to do that. But if I ask myself the question, I wonder what would happen if I entered in. What if I said yes to this thing? What if I did this thing a little bit differently than I've done it in the past? So that's a way, I think, to flesh out curiosity even more. And that's where I'm at right now. That's what
Sure.
I'm looking for in this year, 2024. Maybe instead of just only things that seem fun, even things that don't necessarily seem like something I would want to do, at least ask that question and then decide. And we've talked about failure here, and not everything is going to be like a good idea, but I think part of curiosity is the trying something that you maybe are pretty sure you're not going to want to do, because you
Sure.
could change your mind and you could
Yeah.
grow as a person and as a creative.
And you have
So
to start somewhere. So
mhm,
by asking yourself that
yeah,
question and then just making yourself just give it a try.
yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at, not just for 2024, but even in this season of my career and just in life, I guess. So
What are
we'll
you
see.
going to do with, so you've changed around a little bit of pie in the sky, your business.
Yes.
And like you said, that's not going away. And so I do want you to share just a little bit about where you're heading with that and what people can hire you for too, because there's that
Yeah.
professional side of what you're doing for your career right now in your business. And I really want people to,
Yeah. I
because
mean,
you and I now we're working on other different things. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm pretty far along in my career enough to say that probably the bulk of my creative career has been around branding, or to simplify that, it's making logos or the beginning visual parts of a new business. So last fall, I kind of just dumped my old website. Like it was kind of like the analogy of something sitting on the shelf that needed dusting. That's kind of what my website was looking like
Okay.
because I hadn't really paid any attention to it. So I dumped it. I got a new website, same name, same company name. So it's pieintthesky.co now. Um, and I just started thinking about what kind of how the market has changed and what people actually need. And I put together these packages of branding kits. And it's not a new idea. Other people around are doing that kind of
Hmm.
thing, but I have never like made a list of what you kind of could need if you have a new business. And here's what I would do for you, and here's what the cost is. And not only that, but also over the years, like because I work with entrepreneurs all the time, I'm always thinking of, oh, that's a cool name. That would be a cool business. So I started this thing called branding in a box, where I actually even have the concept in my mind and the name.
Of a business, right? Like the
Yeah.
concept
And
of
so
a
I've
business.
even
Yeah.
gone there. And it's like, well, if you wanted to open whatever business, whatever, you'd have to look at my
Soap
website
making or
to see
whatever.
the,
Yeah.
yes. If it's something that you've thought of but yet you don't know, you're overwhelmed with where to start, I can even help you from that level. And that for me was kind of new and kind of fun, even though I always think of business ideas. I literally can't start them all. And that I think for me will be ongoing. Like I'll keep adding to that part of my website as an idea comes to me.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I think that it's the same but a little bit different. And isn't that still something new? I mean,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So
because you really had to think through. I know you thought through what those packages look like and what people need and when people come to you, what they're looking for and what kind of
yeah,
levels. And it makes it
yeah,
easier to say, I can do this, or this. It's kind of like walking into a cupcake shop and
yeah,
not just having somebody come in and go, well, I like chocolate and
yeah,
I don't really know. And then they say, well, we could kind of make this, but to hand you a
yeah,
menu, it's your
yeah,
menu, which is
yeah,
beautiful.
exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, I think too, like we talked a little bit about Canva, and if people aren't familiar with that, it's kind of a just an online app where you can make your own marketing materials. I
Hmm.
think this is like a way to step into an app like that where you probably don't have the budget to pay someone to make all the things, but you get the starting point, you get the building blocks of what that could look like. And I think that that's just so helpful. And to be honest, I mean, after COVID, like the number of people wanting to start a new business seems like it just really exploded.
Yeah. So your website, and then what about social media? Can people find you on social media?
Well, I took down my Instagram, so that's not the best place, but I have an open
Oh,
Instagram page, which is just Bobbi Lynn Gaukel. And I'm almost daily on Instagram. That's kind of my platform because I'm visual and I'm always snapping a photo of my cat. Like no promises that it's earth-shattering. It's probably a photo of my cat, but I love that.
yeah, it's personal.
So
Hmm.
yeah,
What
I'm
about
there.
Facebook?
I'm also on Facebook right now because my business is new.
Hmm.
I'm kind of just starting from the ground up, so I
Okay.
haven't done a lot of social.
Okay.
And I don't know if I will do a lot of social. I'm
Okay.
kind of in the middle of thinking about social media.
What if you did it differently, or what if you didn't
What
do
if
it?
what if it was more relational, doing more kind of classes and talking to people, in ways that would help them with business, I think. I've always kind of
Yeah.
enjoyed mentoring, and what if I stepped up that game? And so that's not something I would advertise on social media.
Hmm. Two more questions for you, Bobby.
Oh boy.
What advice do you have for the younger generation who they've only experienced a few seasons of their lives so far? What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I think learning to be a listener, and also I think what I'm calling it is a looker arounder.
I love it.
So a lot of being a designer is kind of based on your own, the way that you see the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to be honest, I think a more valuable way of being a designer is to look at how other people see the world and try to communicate some of that. So growing as a listener, growing as someone who notices, someone maybe not being a labeler as much, and we all do it. Like I called myself an introvert, or maybe I call myself, part of Gen X instead of Gen Z. And then we have this preconceived notion based on labels. I think try to limit that as much as you can. Just for all of us as humans, I think that's really a good practice. And especially with young people and young people going into a creative field, I feel like it's just a great thing. It's a way to actually be curious by dropping kind of your own preconceived notions of people and things. So
Sure.
Yeah.
How about go ahead.
Amp up your listening. I think that maybe summarizes it.
Amp up your listening.
Yeah.
For those of us who have experienced many seasons or eras of our lives, what inspiring words do you want to leave us with today?
Yeah, I'm so glad you gave me this question in advance, because I probably would have been like, oh, what am I going to
I know. It's one of those you don't want to be put on the spot. And
so, yeah. So I had to think about it a little. And what I came up with was that life is, in fact, very, very short. And before you know it, you'll be in a new season that's different from the old season. A lot of times we don't plan, and we're in a different season, sometimes because of our choices or things that have happened to us.
Yeah.
But that's what it is to be human. And so rather than constantly seeking like some static happiness, which is kind of what I think the world tells us we should do, embrace the season you're in and try to embrace it with the idea that there will be a new season. So if you're in a great season of life, try to also embrace the idea that it may not last forever, and decide what choices you make out of that. And if you're in a really painful season, also try to realize that it may not last forever. I think it comes down to hope. And I think it comes down to growing as a person. And I think it comes down to keeping curiosity about what your life can mean. So that's been something I've learned kind of in hindsight, that the seasons I've been in have all been meaningful. Some of them have been great, and some of them not so great. And honestly, it kind of keeps you from getting old. Like, I mean, I'm still in that thing where I'm like, oh, seriously? I'm 60? That's crazy. I have so much I want to do still, and things I want to learn. And I think it kind of keeps you in a mindset of there'll always be something new, but I have to be looking. I have to be intentional about it. And I think that it keeps me hopeful, about tomorrow. So
that's great. Bobbi, thank you very much for being here and sharing your inspiration and a new way to think about being curious and growing and being able to walk away from paint by number if it doesn't work.
Throw it in the trash. No one will know. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Right, unless you announce it to the world on a podcast. So
right, exactly.
Thanks, Cindy. Cindy, we love your artist work in Minnesota, but
if Cindy's listening, I'm so sorry.
You're awesome, Bobbi. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Stacy.
Well, at least Bobbi tried the paint by number, because I probably would have just given it away without even trying it. Be sure to read the blog post on randomsweets.com for this episode, because you might really like the recipes that Bobbi shared with us. And the links to my website and Bobbi's website and her social media are in the show notes in your podcast app. If you are enjoying Funeral Potatoes and Wool Mittens, please share it with your family and your friends. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Stacy Mergenthal. Sweet wishes.